Welcome back everyone. Hi, if you're new, my name is Tori and today I'm going to share with you guys all the books I've been reading recently. So we're actually going to start like in December and work our way up to today. So even though I haven't been uploading too much yet in 2022, I've actually been reading a lot. So I've been loving the things that I'm reading. There have been a couple of misses in there so far, but overall I've had a really great start to the reading year. So I'm just gonna take you all through all of it and mention two that I read back in December and we'll just go from there. I'm looking in the viewfinder right now. Just ignore this that's going on behind me. It is such a mess. My bookshelves are so cluttered and it's a real testament to the fact that I have not really been around because it is a hot mess behind me, but we're gonna roll through it. I hope you enjoy this video. Let's get started. So I have my Goodreads page open to help me through this because some of these were a while ago already and I'm just like, oh yeah, I did read that. And I also have been using my reading journal from Melanin Eclectic, which I will leave linked below. If you're looking for an amazing reading journal for this year, definitely go check this one out. So first I want to start back in December with Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. And I like this overall. I definitely enjoyed it way more than The Martian. But still, with Andy Weir, there's just something about the characters, the funny characters, the humor in the prose. There's something about that just doesn't, it just like bumps up against the intensity of the whole plot. And there are just some scenes I found were like kind of ruined by the humor. I'm just like, this is not funny. It doesn't feel natural for it to be lightened by humor. So really the whole book, that was my biggest issue with it and is still my biggest issue with The Martian. But there were a couple of things in Project Hail Mary that saved it from me, you know, just completely disliking it. The first is definitely the flashback chapters. So our main character, he actually wakes up on this spaceship on a mission, but he has no memory of who he is, why he's on this ship, how he got there. And so he's trying to work his way through that in present day, but you know, when he gets these like flashes of memory, that's when we go back into these past chapters and we get a look at how, you know, the build up into how he ended up on this ship and really what's going on. So I loved all the chapters on Earth and we really get to see these scientists come together around the world to figure out how to save humanity from this impending doom should things continue the way that they're going. So I love those chapters. I love the characters that we met on Earth. I love the lead character who was in charge of the whole project and bringing these people together. So I mean, the book definitely has its moments, its really strong moments, and there's also a really amazing character that our main character meets when he's on the spaceship, and just that character was incredible. And also I think the stakes are a lot higher in Project Hail Mary than they were in something like The Martian. In The Martian you have all these people trying to save one man, but in Project Hail Mary you have one man trying to save humanity, and that just in itself is a little more engaging. So the last book I read in 2021 was Finlay, Donovan is Killing It by Cosimano. And I picked up this book solely because of Nakia from Nakia's Hideaway, and this was so much fun. It is definitely the kind of story where you like really need to suspend your disbelief because it gets so outrageous, but it is so much fun. And I feel like this book just, it knows what it is, it knows what it's doing, and it just goes for it. And there are just so many good twists and turns. Finlay Donovan is a thriller writer and she's just been struggling to write her next book, and so she meets with it's either her agent or her editor who she meets with, but they meet at Panera. And so the two of them in Panera start just talking about her writing and hashing out details and ideas like maybe for her next book, but their conversation is overheard by this woman who's sitting very close by, and she just takes the conversation so wrong, and she thinks, instead of being a thriller writer, she thinks that Finlay Donovan is a hit woman. And so she approaches Finlay to, you know, take out her husband. And from there, I mean, the whole thing just becomes so outrageous, so much fun. And it gets really, you know, it gets really tense too because Finlay has these two kids and like she needs the money, and it becomes so wild. But it is definitely just such an entertaining book. I also received an e-arc of Finlay Donovan Knocks Him Dead from NetGalley, and I did recently finish that, and it wasn't as good as the first one, but I mean, it's still just so enjoyable, so much fun. So I highly recommend them both. So now we're going to get into the books that I read in 2022 so far. So I kicked off the year with Behind the Throne by KB Wagers, and not the greatest way I would have started my reading year, but it is what it is at this point. This is the first book in a trilogy. I think it's called the Indranan War trilogy, the Indranan War trilogy. It was fine. Funny story, I actually started reading the book There Before the Chaos because this is the first book in a trilogy as well. And I got about 50 to 60 pages into There Before the Chaos before I was like, something is off, like something doesn't feel right. I really could not put my finger on it the whole time, because I kept checking the back of the book. The side of the book, it says like #1, checked Goodreads, and it said that this is the first book in the Fairy and War trilogy, and I'm like, something is not clear, like something doesn't feel right reading this book. It feels off. It feels like I'm a little bit behind with like character relationships. I don't know what's going on. And it wasn't like the normal confusion that you experience when picking up the first book in a series. It was like that nagging feeling that these characters for some reason had already been like well established before I went into this book, and that feeling stayed with me for about 60 pages. And then finally I just like went back to Goodreads, I looked up the trilogy, I looked up the author, and then I found out that There Before the Chaos is the first book in this author's second trilogy, set in the same world, set after the events of the first trilogy. So I was like, oh well, I just spoiled a lot for myself in those 60 pages. So I went back and I read Behind the Throne. I think overall it just kind of fell flat for me, but there was just so much potential there. Our main character, Hale, she is like the rebel daughter of this empress. When we meet her though, we find out that she actually left when she was young, and she's been living a life out in the galaxy as this gun runner and captain of these ships. And she's just really had this like criminal life since she left her home world and her like royal duties behind. But the book starts when she is quite literally being dragged back home because of all the political turmoil that has happened, and her family is just kind of being torn apart. They need her to come home, take responsibility, and take the throne and save the empire from all of this political turmoil that's been going on. Like I said, the story itself is good. I think it has a lot of potential there, but I think it just really fell a little bit flat for me when it came to the characters. So this is an adult novel, but some of the, how do I say this? Some of the lines of dialogue read very, very young, and I had to question a few times like, how old is this character supposed to be? I was putting her at like maybe 18 years old, 19 years old. I think she's close to 40. So it's just little things like that that were just felt very glaring to me in this book. And also I think there are a lot of character moments that could have been drawn out a little bit longer, some that I think were drawn out a little bit too much. It feels very repetitive after a while, but overall I do think there's a solid plot there. I'm sure it does get better with the next couple of books and even into the second series, but I just don't have a desire to know what happens just yet. The next book that I finished was Spin by Robert Charles Wilson, and I'm going back to my reading journal to remember which notes I put down for this book. So when the story starts, we're following these characters, these fraternal twins and their best friend Tyler, and they're in the twins' backyard and they're like stargazing. The three of them witness the stars go out, and from there it's almost like Earth has been put in this bubble, and outside of it hundreds of millions, even billions of years are going by in the universe, and Earth is still maintaining its normal time. And so this fascination, this fear of this phenomenon known as the spin just becomes this, you know, the driving force behind the entire story. So the book is told through our main character Tyler's third person, you know, POV. We're with him the entire book, but we're seeing the effect that the spin is having on those closest to him and just the world at large. And it becomes just this really fascinating, almost like apocalyptic character study, because, you know, we're watching Jason become this scientist and trying to get to the bottom of what is actually happening with the spin. And then we see the cults, these religious cults that are born out of fear of the spin, and we get that through seeing Diana. I thought that entire character study was really fascinating. And then there's this great metaphor in the book where I think it's like the story of the frog in boiling water, and how if you drop a frog in boiling water, they'll just like jump right out. But if you put them in warm water and keep turning up the heat, it'll be too late before they even know that they're in danger. And that entire story just becomes what spin is about. There's a lot of great like first contact sort of moments in here too, so I enjoyed it overall. So the next book I read was The Prey of Gods by Nicky Drayden, and this was my first experience with Drayden's work, and overall I think it was a solid place for me to start with her work, but I will be reading more by her in the future. So this book is set in futuristic South Africa. In this book we have, I would say, like a decent sized cast of characters. It's five of them, and even though this book is told in third person, you can really tell in each chapter that Nicky Drayden does have this really strong command of tone for each character and like their motivations for doing things, and they're all coming into these just really mysterious and old powers. And so just the exploration of that and being on this almost journey of self-discovery with these characters in their respective chapters, I thought was really well done. Thematically though, I think there's just a little bit too much happening in this story. As you go along, it does start to feel a little bit too disjointed, a little bit all over the place. I mean, it moves very quickly, so just all of those themes coming together, AI and old gods and science and technology, and all of those themes are just spread across these 5 characters in a space that's 300 pages long. And hello. And as the story progresses, I'm just not sure it feels as smooth as it could be. Overall, that doesn't take away from the fact that the book is enjoyable, because it is, and I am excited to read more by Nicky Drayden in the future. Next, I finished Lagoon by Nnedi Okorafor, and I love this. Ever since I finished Who Fears Death last year, and then Remote Control, and now this, it has just felt like non-stop phenomenal work from Nnedi Okorafor. I'm obsessed. It's funny though, because the reasons I just mentioned as to why I didn't love Prey of Gods are the exact same reasons why I love Lagoon. It's so weird, but for some reason that disjointed, quick, chaotic structure of a story and like just hopping around perspectives, it works in something like Lagoon because it's an alien invasion, and that in itself is just entirely chaotic as you're trying to get it from the perspective of so many people, human and non-human, in Nigeria and Lagos. It's just, oh, I love it. So like I mentioned, Lagoon is a first contact story. It's chaotic, it is wild, and you are hopping around the citizens of Lagos perspective so quickly. We do have a core group of characters that we're following who experience this alien invasion, but you're really getting like the city's response to this chaos throughout the story. It's good. I was not expecting that from Nnedi Okorafor. It's really good because I think up until now I've just seen her do such a phenomenal character work in her novellas and even in her longer fiction like Who Fears Death. So it was so fun to finally see her just be like, you know what? I'm about to tell the wildest, most action-driven, plot-driven story you've probably ever read, and it's so good. Hi again. Are you trying to be in the video? I love Lagoon so much. I highly recommend it. It makes me more excited to continue on with Nnedi Okorafor's work. I think I'm going to read Akata Witch next. So next I finished Life is Strange Dust, which is the first volume of Life is Strange comics from Emma Vieceli and Claudia Leonardi and Andrea Izzo, and this was good. Like, if you are a fan of the Life is Strange video game, more than likely you're going to enjoy this. So the comic books actually pick up a year after the events of the video game. So just quickly, if you are unfamiliar with Life is Strange, we're following this character Max Caulfield, who attends this elite prep school, and she is a photographer. One day after saving a girl in the bathroom, Chloe, who then becomes her best friend, after trying to save Chloe in the bathroom, Max realizes that she can rewind time, and so throughout the game you are controlling this power, making decisions, and the decisions that you are making have consequences. And over the course of the game, this butterfly effect is just building up and building up, and it just kind of culminates in this massive storm that's due to Max manipulating time for 5 episodes throughout the game. So at the end of Life is Strange game, you have to make this really massive decision, the biggest one of the entire game. The comic book picks up a year after that decision was made, and so the whole comic series is like an alternate possibility of what could have been after the video games. So I mean, it's good. I enjoyed it. It was great seeing these characters again. Like I mentioned, if you like the game, you'll like the comic books. It was worth the read. So next I finished False Witness by Karin Slaughter, and this was my 3rd Karin Slaughter novel. I'm mad that I stopped to think about that. Like, I've read all of Karin Slaughter's backlist, and it's probably my least favorite. I would put it 3rd. I would still rank The Good Daughter first, and then I would say Pretty Girls, and then this one. If you're already a fan of Karin Slaughter, you will enjoy this. If you're not a fan and coming into her work, maybe not start with False Witness. I would actually start with Good Daughter, even though that might be like traumatizing. With False Witness though, I think this lacks a little bit of the mystery element that I have come to like with Karin Slaughter's novels, that kind of like keep you guessing. With this one, you know what happened, you know who did it, you know character relationships very early on. So we're following these 2 sisters in true Karin Slaughter fashion. Both of them experienced sexual advances and abuse by the same individual, but the younger sister was a little bit more heavily impacted by that. And years pass, and someone who is also very close to the situation reappears in the now women's lives, and he knows what happened. So like I mentioned, if you do like that mystery element in Karin Slaughter novels, I don't think you'll find it too much in this one. That doesn't mean the story isn't still engaging. It's definitely still dark. It's the typical Karin Slaughter themes, so violence, sexual abuse, assault against children, so just be aware of that if you do decide to pick this up. But I think more so than anything, and what I did, I guess, appreciate a little bit more about this than something like The Good Daughter or Pretty Girls, there's just a really somber element to this story that I was not anticipating. It's just sad. I wasn't expecting this book to end the way that it did. It just felt like a very like heartbreaking book. And so again, not my favorite of Karin Slaughter's, but I'm so excited to continue with her work. I do love her as an author, a thriller author, so I will be reading more. Next, I read Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. The structure of this story, just how Jason Reynolds uses that to tell about the cycle of violence in this main character's life and that has surrounded him his whole life, it is actually really genius. Like I wasn't anticipating that. It was really good. So our main character, his older brother, is killed due to gun violence, and he decides to take matters into his own hands, and so he goes to get his brother's gun, and he has it in his mind that he's going to go get revenge on the person that killed his brother. But on the elevator ride down, the entire book takes place in the span of an elevator ride from the 7th floor to the ground floor. Jason Reynolds just really, honed into one character's life and just explored the ripple effects of it, and just reading the conversations that the characters were having and how one thing led to another, and how this person got from point A to B, and how our main character is like now here in the elevator. It was genius. I just thought the story was extremely well told and just 100% worth the read. The next book I finished was Empire of Storms by Sarah J Maas, which is book 5 in the Throne of Glass series. And now I'm finally on book 6. I'm having such a fun time reading through this entire series for the first time. It is really good. So I was actually out of town at the beginning of the month, and I had this book with me. It was actually the only book I had with me, and I was flying through it in the hotel, on the plane, like any free moment I was reading this book, and I loved it so much. Just as a whole so far, I think this series has just hit some really amazing like emotional beats throughout the story that I don't know, I wasn't expecting to feel the way that I feel after finishing the 5th book. These characters have all just been through so much. I just want them to be happy. I had heard a lot of things about Empire of Storms, none of them spoilers, thank goodness, but I've heard like a lot of people being like the 5th book is gonna like ruin your life and all that kind of stuff. I was expecting some hardcore death happening like towards the end of the 5th book, and what happened was just so much worse. I would definitely say Empire of Storms is my favorite by far of the series, and then 3, and then I would put the 4th one, yeah, and then 2, and then 1. I'm still not sure where Tower of Dawn is gonna fall. I will say with Tower of Dawn, the story that is been going on since 1 through 5, the story feels like it's on pause at the moment, and I'm just like, oh, not to mention the entire 6th book. I don't even think I knew this. The entire 6th book, I'll put it like this. There are not many characters in the Throne of Glass world that I don't like, but there is one. There is only one that just really gets on my nerves, and the 6th book is from that character's point of view. I almost screamed when I saw it. The next book I want to talk about is already the best that I have read so far in 2022, and that is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This was so good, you guys. I loved it so much. Eva and Shane are just, they have my whole life right now. I laughed and cried so hard in this book. I love these two characters so much. I'm very unfamiliar with the tropes in romance, but I think this would be classified as like a second chance romance. So our two main characters, Eva and Shane, they're both actually authors. Shane is a lot more successful, has a lot more like literary notoriety, and then Eva has a romance series, and she does have a cult following and like a very active group of fans, but she definitely doesn't have like that level of literary success and like well-known literary success that Shane has. The two of them, they've been writing to each other in their like books for years. So Shane's main character is based on Eva, and like her main characters are based on the two of them. When they were teenagers, for 7 days in June, they crossed paths, and it was just so all-consuming and chaotic. They had that week in June when they were teenagers, and they never saw each other again until they were adults, but they had such a massive impact on the other's life when they were teenagers that they still remember everything. They never let go of that first, like, just that huge love that they had. So the two of them, now as adults, now in their literary careers, meet again, and they have 7 days in June. I'm sorry, I feel like this is not coherent at all. It's very rambly, but I genuinely loved every single thing about this. Eva, she's also a single mother, but she, like, the relationship she has with her daughter, their dialogue is so good. Her daughter is so quirky that she has some of these lines that are just so wild. I loved Eva and Shane. I loved seeing them as teenagers. I loved seeing them in the present day. It is so good. It is, I can't stress that enough. It is so good. I don't think I've ever in my entire life given a romance recommendation. Go read it. And then finally, I feel like I've been talking a long time. Finally, I finished A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers, which is book 2 in the Wayfarers series. And I loved it. And actually, I'm not sure about the rest of the series, but The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet and now A Closed and Common Orbit, you actually do not have to read. I mean, it would help if you want to know a little bit more about our main character in this book, but you actually do not have to read the first book in order to read this one. I think they both stand on their own extremely well, and they are their own like stories. In this book, we are following the AI from the ship in book 1. So even though I did really love book 1 and that kind of like found family feel of the first book, I do like the fact that the cast of characters does feel a little bit smaller in A Close and Common Orbit. Honestly, at this point, I really don't expect anything less from Becky Chambers. I'm very accustomed to her writing style and just the manner in which she tells these stories. Her stories just always have this very like human focus to them, but in this book it almost feels like a little more philosophical in a lot of areas, a little more existential, because you have this AI in this now human form, and so Lovelace or Sidra, they're exploring like what does it actually mean to be human now, and we get these, you know, her struggling with that and with her existence and these like different societal norms and things like that. So I think just Becky Chambers explores that extremely well and also has this warmth to it that I think she is known for at this point. So that is it for me, you guys. Those are all of the books that I have read in the last couple of months. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know down in the comments what you've been reading recently and what your favorite and least favorite so far has been of the year, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.